Imagine you wake up and you find your company's computer systems are completely locked down by ransomware. They're demanding you pay up or you lose everything. You get a call from the board and they're pushing you to make a decision: pay up or call their bluff. What are the cognitive biases that are happening right now in this situation for this character? We'll come back to that at the end. Our brains are pretty amazing at helping us navigate through tons of decisions and information every day, but because our brains have to filter in all this raw information, it often leads us to take shortcuts or put filters on that can lead us astray. Understanding those shortcuts and filters, those biases and heuristics can help us make better choices and understand how others make choices. Decision-making patterns are essentially the habits and the ways in which individuals or groups approach decision and problem solving. Understanding those patterns can help predict behavior. It can improve strategic planning and enhance negotiation tactics. Some common decision-making patterns include rational decision-making, a logical, step-by-step approach, carefully analysing all the available information, considering the pros and cons, and selecting the most logical thing. People usually apply this in situations where there's sufficient time and information to thoroughly evaluate all the options. It's a very common type of decision making in strategic business decisions or complicated problem-solving scenarios. Intuitive decision making relies on gut feeling and instincts, immediate perceptions rather than detailed analysis. It's very subjective and can be influenced by past and experiences and personal values. This type of decision making usually occurs in fast-paced environments where decisions need to be quick and with limited information, such as during emergencies or in creative processes. Avoidant decision-making involves delaying or avoiding decisions in an attempt to evade potential negative outcomes or any conflicts. This pattern stems from fears of making mistakes or uncertainty about what is the best course of action. While generally considered unproductive, this pattern may temporarily serve in situations where time might reveal new information. Dependent decision-making is a pattern you see where people rely on guidance or advice or direction from others when they're making a decision. You usually see this pattern with people who lack confidence in their own judgment or prefer collaborative environments. This type of decision-making can be beneficial in team settings where the collective input is valued and consensus is required, but it might hinder efficiency in situations that require quick, autonomous decisions. Decision-making with heuristics means using mental models or rules of thumb to simplify a decision-making process. While this can make things faster, it might lead to biases or errors in judgment. Sometimes it's effective for routine decisions or when you're navigating a complex situation by breaking it down into smaller, more manageable parts, although it's really important to be aware of biases when you're using rules of thumb. Satisficing is a grey word. It means selecting an option that meets the kind of minimum threshold of acceptability rather than optimizing for the best possible outcome. This pattern arises in a desire to reduce decision-making effort and complexity. It can be useful in low-stakes environments or when time and resource constraints prevent a thorough analysis of all options. There are some other ingredients that you should be aware of that come into the process of decision-making. Heuristics are those shortcuts or rules of thumb that we were talking about. There are many of them, but I'll just give you an example. Imagine you're guessing which team will win a soccer match. Instead of analysing the past games and the players and the strategies, you might just pick the team that won the most matches in the last couple of rounds. That's called the availability heuristic, where you make a decision based on the information that's easiest to remember. Also, there's uncertainty. Life often doesn't give us all the information we need to make decisions. Sometimes we have to decide when things are uncertain, like whether to carry an umbrella based on the clouds. Our brain can often put on some things that change our decision making. Cognitive biases are like the Instagram filters of our brains. They change how the photo looks, and they change how our brain interprets information. For example, if you've ever had that feeling that, I just knew that was going to happen, you might be experiencing hindsight bias, where you believe you knew something that was going to happen after it already did, even if you didn't know. Coming back to crafting scenarios and choices inside of tabletop exercises, as a game master, you can cleverly utilize biases and heuristics to create compelling and realistic situations. So we'll define some of these and then give you examples. This shouldn't be necessarily setting up or teeing up your participants to fail, but rather introducing interesting hurdles. Confirmation bias is like choosing things to reaffirm our pre-existing beliefs. It's important for us to consider alternative viewpoints. If you suspect people may have a bias for aggressive strategies, perhaps present a scenario where more diplomatic approaches might be more successful. Anchoring is using the first piece of information to influence subsequent decisions. For instance, mentioning the high cost of a project early in the exercise might make participants overly cautious with their budgets, affecting strategic choices. Again, being aware of these is the most important thing. You might want them to be overly cautious, so you could use anchoring to your advantage. Loss aversion is the bias that we value things we already have and have a fear of losing those resources, whether it's time or money or reputation, that can influence decision-making about those things. Sometimes this can lead to risk-averse behavior, and you can negate this by balancing potential gains against the fear of loss a little bit more transparently. You can use different levels of information inside a scenario by presenting incomplete or ambiguous information, forcing people to make decisions under uncertainty. This tests players' ability to use limited data effectively. You can use probabilistic outcomes, where certain choices are not guaranteed but probabilistic. That requires players to assess risks and make decisions based on potential probabilities rather than certainties. You can also use scenario branching, like a decision tree, full of branching paths where decisions lead to divergent outcomes. This can showcase the compounding effect of decisions and illustrate how initial choices can limit or expand future options. Going back to our company locked down by ransomware and the board is demanding that we do something, we can talk a little bit more about some of the other biases that might be at play. One that we already mentioned is loss aversion. The fear of losing valuable data or operational capability can outweigh the rational analysis of the situation of the ransomware, avoiding losses over acquiring equivalent gains. Sunk cost fallacy is the inclination to continue something once an investment has already been made, in money or effort or time. This might lead a company to pay a ransom in the hopes of salvaging some already compromised data, or if after a first payment they demand more payment to continue that trend. Your sunk costs are weighing you down and are biasing your decision making. Anchoring bias here might be occurring with the tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information, in this case, the demand for a ransom. The initial shock of a ransom could influence the decision-making process, making the costs seem unavoidable, or conversely, way too steep to consider. There also might be an action or doing something bias, which is the predisposition towards taking an action rather than inaction when faced with a decision. The urgency and pressure of the situation might compel decision makers to just pay the ransom to feel like they are just doing something as a proactive step, rather than waiting or seeking alternative solutions. By incorporating the understanding of cognitive biases and heuristics into scenarios, game masters can create more immersive and challenging exercises that test players' decision-making skills in much more realistic ways. It also helps the analysis. This approach not only makes the exercises more engaging, but it provides valuable lessons in critical thinking, strategy, and adaptability, and it can really help with analysis. This is just a skim over the level of decision-making science, and I encourage you to read more widely and understand how people make decisions. Thanks for watching. These lessons will be dropping weekly on YouTube, but if you want to get them all right now, you can take the foundation course for free on our website, where you will also get the lesson notes, summaries, assignments, checklists that guide you through all the learning objectives we've covered. At the end of that course, you'll also get a certificate of completion and an invite to our directory and community where you can meet some other game masters and use the Long Game Project as a platform to showcase your work. If you want to take your game mastery further, completion of this course is a prerequisite to unlock the advanced professional course, along with the Game Master track, where we dive deeper into the content and further along the skill tree. You can also check out some of our other free tools in the description below, including our Tabletop Exercise Starter Kit, our scenario generator, the trove of existing scenarios, our SOP checklist library, and our new RPG character sheet, CV, and LinkedIn template, which is really cool. I did mine this morning, and now all my network knows that my dump stat is probably Dex, and I'm definitely neutral good. Roll on!